Good afternoon, everyone. We'll quickly jump in. So our topic today is to evaluate what are the reskilling and reskilling initiatives we need to take up when we think of AI. So we're going to look at two themes. One is how will organizations and organization leaders approach hiring, skilling, and reskilling. And the second part we're going to look at is how will the workforce prepare to succeed in this new world of work. We'll start with you, Jeffrey. From what you're seeing at Karat, what has been the impact of AI on hiring strategies and practices of tech companies? And drawing from Karat's latest hiring trends, do you think companies are beginning to rethink their approach to finding and developing talent?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and I appreciate being here. Despite all of the energy and the huge opportunity around Gen AI, most of the companies we talk to are pretty conservative and cautious when it comes to implementing projects and also changing their hiring processes. BCG actually just came out with a survey last month where they talked to 1,400 executives around what Gen AI projects they were having and what impact it was going to have. And they classified 90% of the companies in what they called observers, which were people who were using Gen AI for really small scale projects, and they were kind of in a wait and see mode. And that's exactly what we're seeing when we talk to companies in the space. Most of the CIOs that we talk to are using Gen AI for things like internal efficiencies and software engineering productivity, but they're not actually moving all the way to consumer-facing applications, especially in regulated industries. One CIO that I talked to last week said pretty succinctly, like, I'm not going to put Gen AI in any pacemaker anytime soon, right? And we're seeing the same thing in kind of hiring processes, as well as like the type of talent people are hiring for. So people are pretty cautious and conservative. Now, we are seeing obviously an increase in demand for things, expertise in LLMs, Gen AI, machine learning, but companies are pretty realistic about their ability to hire large quantities of people with these talents. And so what they're doing is they're actually hiring for adjacent skill sets and general skill sets. So in that hiring trends report that you just mentioned, we surveyed 500 tech executives, and what we found is the most in-demand skills were data analysts, data engineers, and cloud engineers. So people are thinking like, we got to hire folks, and then we're going to skill them up, right? But what was most fascinating about that study was that the engineering leaders who were top performing, meaning they hit their hiring goals and they felt best about the engineering productivity of their teams, they were twice as likely to be hiring general software engineers and full stack engineers. So interestingly, like the more technologies are advancing at a really rapid pace, in some ways, like having expertise becomes obsolete even faster. So your knowledge of those skill sets is less important than your underlying understanding of the fundamentals, your problem-solving skills, your ability to deal with ambiguity, and your ability to learn really rapidly. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the market right now.
Thank you. A lot of great points. And segueing that to you, Vinay. Organizations are also investing heavily in upskilling, and there are some recent reports that suggest that there are some companies that are allocating as much as 1.5% of the budget towards upskilling. At the same time, as Jeff said, the average sort of half-life of skills is rapidly coming down. In your work, what are you seeing is the impact of AI and Gen AI? How are leaders of organizations looking at upskilling their workforce? And also, if you're seeing how companies and leaders are thinking of leveraging Gen AI and AI in skilling or making decisions about deploying of resources towards upskilling.
Yeah, sure. So, look, the market trends today are actually talking about accelerated digital transformation. Digital transformation was already upon us for several years, really. But it's the acceleration that is really impacting businesses today. And especially with the advent of Gen AI over the past few months, the acceleration has further got sort of impacted there. And because of which, one fundamental shift that organizations have made now is around creating themselves as skills-based organizations rather than job-based organizations. Because the speed at which jobs are changing or evolving, or at times even becoming redundant, new jobs are getting created. If one is focused from a skilling point of view, purely on jobs, by the time you're actually building your learning strategies, the job might actually have already evolved. right? So hence, skills-based is the approach that most organizations are taking. Um, this is also coupled with the fact that, so in fact, McKinsey did a survey recently of global organizations, and what they found was 87% of organizations are already seeing skills gaps in their talent pool, and there is absolutely no way that they can actually not avoid looking at bridging the gap and actually formulating strategies to address that. World Economic Forum has also talked about saying that, hey, 60% of people in organizations globally will have to be to either upskill or reskill to be relevant when it comes to the jobs that are coming up by 2027. Now, couple that with this entire piece around when we talk about skills-based organizations. If you look at business impact in itself, um, there's a Deloitte study which is pretty interesting, which actually talks about companies who have been the pioneers there. In fact, companies such as IBM, Bank of America, Walmart, they've already started moving in that direction in terms of becoming skills-based organizations. They are seeing about 107% impact in terms of efficiently deploying talent that they have. They are seeing 52% more innovation happening in the organization, and around 57% adeptness in terms of their ability to anticipate change and navigate through change. Now, these are solid numbers, really, in terms of really justifying that. Now, when it comes to AI, really, there are two sides of the story. One is about adopting AI and really looking at transforming businesses. There are four use cases that are emerging and that we are seeing now on ground. Firstly, leaders themselves, right? When they have to actually lead their organizations through AI-led transformations, uh, they need to first understand what Gen AI really would mean, how would that impact. Responsible and ethical AI is a big question at the leadership level, and the amount of change that they would want to really bring in and at what speed is something which is a big question that they need to answer. So firstly, it's the transformational leadership piece from an AI point of view. The second is understanding of Gen AI across the organization in itself, the fundamental understanding that companies are looking at establishing. The third use case that is a very obvious one is the tech talent that is there. How do you actually rapidly upskill your tech talent when it comes to Gen AI so that they are able to build better products, build better solutions? Fourth one, which is very interesting, and this is where really organizations are seeing adoption happening. Maybe in certain instances they are going a bit slow, which is about adopting AI and especially Gen AI when it comes to functional areas, whether it is finance, marketing, supply chain. So four use cases really there. Lastly, you asked about how do you actually improve your learning or skilling strategies and implementation in itself by leveraging AI. Simply put, I think the approach there and what we call as leveraging collaborative intelligence. So it's not just artificial intelligence, but a combination of human intelligence going in there in order to build better efficiencies, uh, make it more targeted and personalized because AI makes that possible to rapidly build your curation in terms of learning paths, uh, better insights in terms of learner behaviors, and also to a very large extent building that connect, one-to-one connect between an instructor and the individual learner, where an individual learner might have doubts, clarifications that they might want to ask because everything is digital now. There's no person sitting in front of me to answer those questions. AI is going a big way in terms of addressing that as well. So multiple areas that we see there work happening, but it all starts with the skills-based organization really because it makes it more broader rather than focusing on just one transformative technology that has come in here.
Thank you. Some great points, and we'll come back to the insights-based learning. But pivoting to you, Sajid, we heard about the four use cases. One of them was how do we use AI in sort of other functions such as finance. So would love to hear from you, from your experience. What do you see as AI or Gen AI's impact on functions and industries such as finance and banking? We also heard a little bit about how we might, as an industry, need to move away from traditional modes of hiring to a skills-based hiring, skills-based promotion decisions. What are you seeing at Wells Fargo on this?
Yeah, so, but before I start talking about the subject, you know, every few years, you're going to find this, the machines are coming, right? Or the rise of the machines. I've heard this since the 2003 movie, Terminator, called The Rise of the Machines. So in general, this thing has always been there. So in the 2000, not that I'm giving away my age, but around 2000, you really had the data marts, which played a big shift in those days. And there were companies and industries talking about the power of data. Early 2010, 11, 12, machine learning was a big thing. And every company that I know, including where I serve, we built the first models in 12 and 13. And then also this question of, will the jobs go and will we continue? Then we have, in the 15 and 16, we had intelligent automation, RPAs, and how they will take over the world, how it is simpler to teach people to do that. And now we are sitting here with generative AI as a topic. So in a sense, as we're seeing this evolution, one of the things we have also found out is despite that euphoria around these technologies, the adoption of these are fairly, has to be conservative, and for for few reasons. Number one, most organizations that are dealing with large customers, especially retail customers, one of the challenges you have as a financial services is you support a lot of customers who are retail customers. And while banks and financial services and tech companies and product companies will think about, hey, how can I bring these technologies to everyday customer on the street? The regulators are worried on the other side about the advent of these technologies and how do you actually control them. A vivid example I would give there is when you apply for a loan with a bank, right? On what basis did the bank actually sanction that loan or did not sanction that loan? That's where biases do kick in. And I'm not saying that is the only place where we have to use. So places where these are more customer facing, we do find these technologies require a whole lot more explanation, and that's where a term called explainable AI comes, but it essentially means, hey, if you made a decision for me, can you please share with me what that decision is? So that's one vector. But the other thing that I've also seen from an organization perspective is, look, we are a large generational bank, right? We have products every time, from the time you have a kid to the time you settle down in life to in your midlife when you're making all the money that you make, and then when you retire and retirable products. And we are about 240,000 people globally as a company. And do all the jobs that we have a use case for AI? Short answer is no, right? And there's a nice correlation between AI and the type of jobs. The harder they are to do physically, the less AI has a role, right? So in that perspective, one of the things that we are looking for are things that are more institutional, more at the back end. So we would not look at products that, like for example, credit decisioning is not an area where we would be comfortable with AI at the stage at which it is. But the other thing I've also seen very interestingly is, and I think you brought up this interesting point, if you go to any of the engineering schools in India today, in the final year when you're interviewing them, if you ask them what their projects are, it's always about machine learning, it's all about AI. And it baffles me that you studied 32 subjects over a 4-year period and you just picked one topic without clearly not knowing that 90% of those jobs are for the other 31 subjects you studied, not the one. And my final say on the regulatory matters is one of the reasons why this technology is very powerful and equally a challenge for many companies to adopt is when things go wrong, the regulators typically like to know who can they fire, who's really accountable for that. Yeah. It's hard for you to point to a machine and says, well, I didn't do that, the machine did it. That's not going to fly, right? And that's where the regulators are saying, we love you to have this, we want you to optimize, but at the same time be responsible of this. So that's really my opening pitch on this topic. So, there are 5 senses the human brain has: speech, visual, right? These are the 2 that the current technologies have taken over. They can recognize language, they can recognize image, and the composition of these 2 is called the multimodal, and a lot of models around that. The good news is the other 3 ones they haven't really figured out: touch, smell, and taste, right? And so, we still have hope as humans to survive the landscape. So that's what I would say. Over to you.
Thanks, Sajid. Jeff, we heard about a little bit of the problem with having machines make decisions, or problems with implicit bias. Now, at Karat, when you're leveraging AI in the interview process, or in I know you mentioned that machines don't make hiring decisions, but would love to understand from you, what kind of frameworks or mitigation strategies should organizations think of as they start leveraging more and more AI in their hiring processes?
Yeah, well, first I'm going to try and figure out how to put a Terminator reference in this answer. But AI theoretically holds a lot of promise when it comes to reducing bias. It can treat candidates evenly and fairly, and it can be more impartial. But it can also have a lot more risk in that it can embed existing biases and scale those really rapidly. And also it can do it, as Sajid was saying, it was like in a way that's a black box, right? And you don't understand why it's making decisions that it's making. I actually also just saw a study the other day that showed that actually not just the AI can learn from the humans, but humans are actually learning from AI. When AI is biased, the humans are actually starting to embed that into their brains, and even after they stop using the tool or technology, they've absorbed the bias that came from the AI and still will carry it on. So there's some real risk here if we don't get this right. For Karat, there's been a couple of things that we advocate for when people are trying to reduce or mitigate bias in a hiring process. So the first is just that making sure all of the factors that you make a decision on are really competency based. The only competency should be, what does it take to do this job well? It's very easy, for example, in your models to exclude things like race and gender and age, but other attributes that you may not think are correlated with those things tend to be correlated with them, especially if you're looking at historical performance of who's done well in the job. That could have been biased by the selection process of who is getting promoted. For Karat, for example, none of our interview engineers look at resumes before they walk into an interview, because they're not doing a resume review interview. They're doing a technical interview, and there's no reason to know that somebody worked at Google or they went to a certain school, because all you're doing is just biasing that interviewer. And just the same thing for your models. You should just not even introduce that as an aspect that they can bias for. So the first one is just making sure everything is really competency based. The second one is just figuring out where in the loop the human should be to be most effective, and how do they work with technology. So hiring should not be all human, and it should not be all technology. For example, our interview engineers, they don't actually make a recommendation as to who should move on to the next round after their interviews. They're just documenting exactly what skills were demonstrated in that interview based on the competencies that we talked about, and also really strict rubrics. And then our technology actually makes the recommendation as to who should move on to the next round. That eliminates things like likability bias. You and I, we got along, we went to the same school, all of this type of stuff. Now I'm going to override the system and get you through the next round. And then once we make our recommendation, it's not like our clients are actually just accepting that and hiring the person after it. There's still a human after they do more interview loops and other things that makes judgment about who should get hired. But because they have to stare in the face of a consistent hiring process that was driven by technology plus human, when they want to override that system, they also have to then explain their reasoning as to why they're doing that. And so there's a check there on the human that's like, well, why are you choosing number 3 on the board as opposed to number 1 as the person who scored? And you have to explain because they have something that actually matters for the role as opposed to my personal preferences. And then lastly, I'd just say is, we do a lot of work monitoring the data that comes out of our interviews. So for one, no interview goes live without our questions being tested, our interview formats being tested, and we need to make sure there's a representative sample of candidates so that you can know, is there any discrepancy in performance by race, gender, all the restricted class things. And then we are constantly monitoring the data that comes out of it. So if we start to see that a certain question is biased against a certain population, we will then dig in and investigate. It's like, why did that cause that? Is it, we either get rid of the question if we can't figure out why, or we'll learn from that question as to why we saw a difference in results, and then we'll use that to make all the questions better. So you just have to be really vigilant about the data that's coming out of your process, and the more consistent you can make your process, the better the data will be.
Thanks. I'm going to go. I'm going to move to you, Sajid. On a similar theme, you touched a little bit upon your opening remarks that it's likely that AI will not help with decision making, such as who gets a loan or who's creditworthy or who is not. But there are other use cases, right? For instance, I mean, I'm from LinkedIn and Microsoft, so I can say this. Just AI being sort of a co-pilot to a lot of your other processes. So, are there some use cases that you can think of from your industry that you think
Sure.
AI would assist or be a co-pilot to?
Yeah, no, that's a very important. It's just that not we are not doomsday sayers that
Yes.
AI is not a use case.
Absolutely.
The areas where we love to use AI at this point of time, Copilot, for example, and obviously a lot of the players in the industry do have that as a product and a suite of offering. We have 20,000 developers currently in technology globally, right? And each of them are writing code every day. Where Copilot can come in handy is you don't have to repeat the same, and I'm using a very rudimentary example. Every application has a login screens, and banks typically have thousands of applications. And therefore, what would be interesting is if somebody has written that, Copilot can give a recommendation. So when I hire somebody from a school, fresh out of school, coming into the organization, they don't have to go asking the apprenticeship model. You have a senior person that you work with and exact that. The benefit that they have is much of the standard use cases are largely recommended by Copilot, and we are already experimenting that internally. And we're very close to getting that into production for technology per se. We believe that's going to be a huge potential for us. And I don't want to emphasize on the word on efficiency or productivity because that's always subjective. But I think where that is usually where the big best part about technology, every new technology that you see out there has been designed with a simple purpose, to make your life as simpler and less painful as it is. And we believe that's one use case. The other one that we find a lot of use cases, anybody who has a contact center, if you know how a contact center works, there's a sequence of questions and very, with a lot of empathy, those questions are asked, but do know that they're prompt-driven questions versus can you get to the context of the text that's being asked? If somebody says something, you should have the context. And most likely a contact center person may not have the understanding of why that person is calling. What AI can do is go through, for example, there's been an overdraft of whatever, 500 rupees out from your account or $5 from your account. And in the context of when that action happened, the customer is calling. To have the contextual know-how, yes, potentially this could be the reason they are giving, and making that timing much more faster, that's one. The other one that we are super excited about is every company has 50 different reporting tools across 50 different, and about 5,000 to 10,000 reports. Where AI can help is because the syntaxes are what this language is really smart about. What they can do is it will make conversion from one technology platform to a central common platform as seamless as it can be. And the other big thing that we are excited about is when we hire new people, we are hiring them for their thinking, not for their actual syntax writing capability, which I wished I had it when I started off with my first interview, where I was asked all kinds of questions. So obviously I failed my first one because I was really good at it. But I think somewhere around in my career that, somewhere that is, but in today's modern world, I think people are respected for their talent and their ability to challenge versus the, coding will become a irrelevant topic in the modern age. So I think that's where the whole potential of this new age technology is. And back to Jeff's point, I think one of the things Jeff and I were speaking in the break was, one of the advantages of these tools is when you're hiring a resource anywhere in the world, that becomes a global talent because it's hired through the same set of hiring standards. Versus, if you hire them in Europe, it's different, Asia is different, in the US it's different. And it also helps us explain to the question of explainability of AI, that the talent you have in this part of the world is no different than what you have. And that kind of helps with a global integration, which is a big, big requirement for industries in India today.
Absolutely. Lot of ideas was sparking when you were talking. But Vinay, You mentioned that you track a lot of metrics and insights basis what the skill demand is and what kind of learning content the consumers are consuming. So, what are you seeing vis-a-vis AI? What are the top growing skills that people are learning? Is he just said that there's going to be no need for coders in the future, and even though he started with I'm not a doomsday person. So what are you seeing? And we
will be.
also, on the other hand, we also heard Jeffrey mention that there's a lot of demand for the human side of skills.
Yeah.
We heard about adaptability, we heard about curiosity, lifelong
Right.
learning.
Yes.
Yeah, would love to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, to that part, we already have a use case on zero code. So that's essentially coming in basically because of that part about saying, hey, if talent is going to be scarce, then how can we actually get people ready for jobs where otherwise they wouldn't have been eligible, right? Because they didn't have the coding background or the capabilities there. But that apart, I think since you started the question asking about trend and numbers there, it's been a bit crazy, frankly. I think when ChatGPT sort of dawned upon this world, I think it was November year before last, and we obviously saw a massive surge on our Udemy platform. In fact, in the first quarter itself, we saw the surge was about 5,549%.
Wow.
How much?
Surge
Okay.
in terms of consumption of Gen AI courses as such, right? So obviously, there was a spike there, and then it started settling down. But even then, through the year 2023, we saw only on ChatGPT. Of course, it was followed by Midjourney and then prompt engineering as such, but only on ChatGPT was still more than 4,000% higher than what it would have been earlier as such. But that was obvious, right? Because there's something new that has dawned into it. But what we see is more on the enterprise side, right? Because that's where we are seeing that it's sort of a mix of caution as well as optimism in terms of wanting to be prepared for what's coming next. Even there, we are seeing a 60% increase in interest when it comes to Gen AI and learning and building skills and consuming courses around Gen AI as such, right? So obviously that's really building up. I think what really is becoming more and more crucial though, and since you talked about soft skills or power skills, etc., that people are talking about, at the end of the day, if I have to perform any role or a job, it's a combination of skills that are going to come into play, right? So the hardcore technical skills coupled with the power skills and maybe some other context, like Sajid said, context is critical there. And I always say, if content is king, then context is the kingdom, right? They all they go together. You can't have content without context as such. So from that point of view, it's always going to be a collaborative intelligence, as I said earlier. You need the human connect there. For example, if you are actually training your people on whether it is presentation skills or customer interaction skills and all that, one piece that will always come into play is what does your organization stand for? What are the values that the organization follows, right? And that are unique to you and that differentiate your human interactions with the outside world. That piece, AI may not be able to bring in, right? You'll need a human involvement there. Similarly, when it comes to subject matter expertise on any topic as such, what we are seeing is increasingly, while AI might take care of certain parts of the basic concepts and all that, when it comes to application and practical situations that you're going to face, whether it is in the oil and gas industry or whether it is banking or whether it is into manufacturing, um, there is going to be that unique expertise that a practitioner would bring in, and that angle has to be considered there. So, for example, today as we speak, there's an Indian pharmaceutical company which is actually training its supply chain team on saying how can they actually leverage NAI and AI skills to come up with better predictive analytics in terms of consumption patterns and hence supply and demand. How do they actually manage better as such? Um, Now, there again, it's a combination there where in-house subject matter expertise coupled with external expertise and insights that are brought in, say, from a Udemy course are being sort of deployed together. So it's to a large extent that's how it is going to be. It's more about saying where does AI really take care of your mundane tasks that are repetitive as such. Like Sajid said, always new technology is expected to do that. But there are certain instances where human intervention will continue to be there as such.
Aditi, I just wanted to add,
Yes,
because you
go
threw
ahead.
me under the bus with the, I hate software developers, so I just want to clarify that. I think the context around that is today, most companies in India hire, I mean, the minimum requirement should be an engineer. It does not matter what discipline of engineering. We're taking this raw engineering who've been taught 32 different engineering concepts and making them understand domain. I would love to have an engineer who understands, macroeconomic conditions, right, of global economy, sector, steel. What this new age technology will do is it will allow us to explore kids out of other disciplines,
Absolutely.
right? Because now you get the SME in our capital markets, which is the securities, which is largely to do with the trading platform. We have a program where we hire, engineers, but we also hire business analysts who understand how this works, and then kind of superimpose. Wouldn't it be amazing if I could just hire those business analysts who actually understand the domain, right? Which is what they're taught and do. What they don't know is the coding part, the syntax and semantics. That's where I think these technologies. Again, the good news is it's still an evolving topic. It'll be another 3 to 5 years before all this matures, and who knows, something else will come at that point of time.
Thank you. Thanks for closing us out with that interesting remark, Sajid. So we learned a lot today. We learned that the way we hire is going to change. It's likely to move from how we've traditionally hired, credentials based, where you went to school, what job you've done in the past. It's going to move away from that. It feels like what we've always called soft skills or power skills is going to gain supremacy. So there is more humanization happening, less mechanization. We've discussed this inside conversation that this is not the first time this is happening, right? If you look at the long arc of our history, these moments have come in the past, whether it's with internet or cloud or personal computing devices. And we were joking that if you go back and see Charlie Chaplin movies, they're also about what is industrialization going to do to jobs. So, but this seems like a little bit more of a more nuanced moment, so to say. There is a lot of conversation on jobs that are going to likely go away, and then there's going to be a surge of new kinds of jobs. So, just final thoughts. I know none of you are doomsayers, and none of you are also breathless by this moment. So, final thoughts. How should leaders, and lots of leaders in this room, how should leaders and policymakers be looking at this moment in time? We'll start with you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I think what you were just talking about really matters, which is just the more the technology advances, the more we need actually to draw out the humanness of us all to actually be successful. So, I think all the skills and traits that we're saying, like what can the human uniquely do, is a question that we ponder a lot. In our interviewers, or it's like, hey, is there something in technology that is doing that actually a human being should do? And so I think for every leader, it's kind of like, what are actually the pieces of work that a human is always going to be the best to do? And Vinay was kind of talking about values and things like that, where it's like you can't just type into ChatGPT declare our values for our company, right? That's not what's going to happen. And so I think it's just a really helpful framework to just think through, like, what actually makes us human and unique, and that is never going to go away, and then kind of invest really heavily into those things, into upskilling and empowering your people. And so that's kind of what I would lead with.
Thank you. Sajid.
Yeah, the technology is here to stay. You only have one choice. You have to embrace it. But more importantly, both the regulators and the industry will find that this one is very different from the other four that we have spoken about, because the advent of the computing and the accessibility of the computing. So this one's will disrupt, but I think as a society, we will find better ways of doing this, and we'll continue to reinvent. It'll just make life a whole lot more simpler going forward. So I'm very, very optimistic about what this can do for the industry this time around. The machines are coming.
But we'll be back.
There, you got your
There we go.
reference in
Yep.
there. Last words.
I'll keep
Vinay.
it short there. Reskill at speed yourself, provide opportunity for your people to be able to reskill at speed. But I think the fundamental aspect is about learnability. If you have the ability to unlearn, learn, and relearn, you will always survive. If one job goes, there are 2 more jobs that are coming up. So that's how it's going to continue.
Thank you so much, and we are absolutely on time. Sorry.
Questions?
Yes. How will we do this? Yeah. If anyone has questions for our fabulous panelists here.
Hi. Hello.
Because it would-
Should I?
Is it not working?
No.
Okay, I can read out the question if it's at rest.
Okay.
Okay. So I head the engineering at an HR tech called as IMOCA.
Oh, there we go.
Is it audible? Okay. Our vision is brewing a skills first planet. That is the marketing aspect. Okay, coming to the question. So when GenAI was pioneered in IMOCA, though I had the engineering, the first use case of GenAI did not come from the engineering team. It came from the marketing team. It came from the content team and the other team. So I do not consider that as a failure of engineering. I actually consider it as a success of GenAI. Now the question, the main question here is that should we keep the GenAI as a sub-capability or an experimental capability of each and every team? Or is it a better idea to create a capability center out of GenAI, but then killing experimentation for each and every team? So yeah, that's the question. What is your opinion? And being being an organization that actually talks about transforming organization to skills-first organization, I think we should be able to answer that question also, but I still need your answer for this.
So let me give you that answer. So your question is a very interesting one. So it's broken into actually, the implementation is broken into 2 halves. The governance of what you're doing as an organization should be centralized.
Exactly.
There's this term called thought and leadership, right? The thought can be across the organization. You should not mix thought and leadership as one entity. So you're better off if you let everyone in the organization think about GenAI use cases than a central body which does that. Because then you get into, if you're in a large scale organization, the classic case, we don't have enough resources. We cannot prioritize this time. Which is why I'm glad that you said your marketing department brought it up, because that's what this technology does, right? Because the coding skills are no longer a prerequisite to use this, because that's what the model does for you. There is a whole lot of teams who will actually do that. Imagine when the medical profession gets into a serious use case of this, right? I don't know how many of you wear any of the smart devices, but even if you have a phone, there is enough telemetry being collected about you right now. The environmental conditions, some sort of monitoring pressure, steps, etc., right? Eventually you'll find that a lot of people would do that. But having a central governance is to make sure when things go wrong, you have enough governance to prove both to the regulators and to your customers that you have a very disciplined one. So break the solution into 2 halves. The thinking at the grassroots level, the governance in a central body, that will really help.
Thanks a lot, Sajid. Beautifully answered.
Do you want to add?
Yeah, just
Yes.
one thing. I do think that it's everybody at the company's responsibility to understand what the impact and opportunities are with Gen AI. One of our client CEOs told their company recently, you will never lose your job here because of AI, but you will lose your job if you don't understand how AI can apply to our business, right? And you really need to think through that, and every employee's responsibility. So I agree completely that governance does need to be centralized, but I do think it's every individual employee's responsibility, and you need to invest in them and make that clear that they need to understand what's going on, because this is a massive trend that they need to stay on top of.
Thanks, guys. Beautifully answered.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a 4th-year student, engineer. But being an engineer, as you said, I am the one of the person who is very much interested in business analyst. So from the last 2 months, I was facing a lot of issues, and I'm not that sure that business analyst is worth it or not. Because now I think because human mind is more faster than AI. Because everybody is talking about the AI, but everything is start with the human mind. So question with you is, what are the things you look for the business analyst to be hired for as a fresher?
go for it?
I guess I walked into this one, so I will do the honors of answering that. Look, look, when we say business analyst, it's about the domain that you bring in, right? If you're in engineering and not everybody likes coding as a discipline, right? You choose engineering.
It's me, sir.
Yeah. No, and you would have chosen engineering for a variety of other reasons, right? Because that was the best thing you could do when you started after your 12th. The skill set that we look for typically when we hire, and look, I'm not a big fan of the engineer. We look for talent who can express themselves, who when presented with a problem can break it down and then provide a solution. So we are really looking for people who can actually answer the questions for the problems that they face. If they can explain what solutions they have made for the problems that they had in their engineering academy, that's what we're really looking for. But really where I am interested in going out is if I can go to one of those economic major schools and then hire an economist and then have them in technology. Today, everybody who in technology is, at least in this country, comes with an engineering background. That seems to be the minimum requirement. You're lucky actually to be born in this day and age because Gen AI is out there to help you. So have the hope, I think it will come through.
I'm going to have to.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for your answers. So basically, as you said, that there in business analyst there are lots of what makes us surety that we can do the business analyst, because in the past, back in lockdown, as we know, it's all about the COVID season. So in that, I did the business for 1.5 years, and in my under there is 100 of people working with me. So there I got that what it business means and what is the human minds. It's all about the talking about the AI. But from my side, human minds are more stronger than the AI.
I'm sorry, but please, we need to open up the tracks, and we're like 7 minutes to break.
So what I'll do is I will come out of this stage and I will answer your question separately.
That's mean a lot to me. So
yeah, okay, I'll be
so
there.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You've been a fabulous audience.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.